I started going on in Instagram and TikTok and YouTube, and like all the people on there are selling this get rich quick stuff, flip houses, buy this particular cryptocurrency, do this, do that. And you too, trade options and buy my program for $29.99. And then you're going to get rich quick. And I was just appalled by all that stuff that was on there. And so I started trying to bring back some of the like basic stuff. And, there weren't a lot of people on those programs that are saying, no, slow down. You got to actually like do the work. You got to put in the hours and do the work. And the most dangerous thing about the get rich quick stuff is it's demoralizing.
All right, guys, bang, bang. I've got Graham here. Graham, I thought a great place for us to start the conversation is that you've said your favorite quote is from Michelangelo. And he said, if people knew how hard I worked to gain my mastery, it wouldn't seem so wonderful. Why is that your favorite quote?
Well, I think that when people think about Michelangelo, they think he's some magician that has these superpowers that they could never attain. And then for him to say, actually, there are no superpowers. It's just the power of working super hard. I just love that it demystifies this thing that we're supposed to have all this embedded talent. And if we're not born with it, we don't have it. And so I think it kind of opens up. If Michelangelo feels that way, then there's hope for the rest of us,
It is funny. It's like one of these, obviously very old quotes and somebody who I think we all look back to and we're like, we can't even remember how long ago it was, but it's still true today. Obviously there's, the kind of like the Instagram culture of everyone shows their best life or whatever. And he seems to have nailed it hundreds, if not thousands of years before.
I mean, it's 1000% been the story of my life. It's been a lot more time and hours to get anywhere that I wanted to get, a lot more work. And yeah, it's just probably if I could give a quote to summarize my life, it'd probably be the same one.
Amazing. You've talked before about exceptional people create exceptional businesses. And I thought maybe we could break that down. Like, how do you identify an exceptional person and know, hey, this is somebody who kind of checks that box?
Yeah, well, I'll answer that question in 1 second. But in the private equity business, it is kind of unique for us to have as our number one criteria the management team. It's a little bit counterintuitive. I spent a lot of time in private equity thinking about industries and purchase prices and leverage multiples and multiple expansion and all these different things. And after all that work, I came down to the number one most highly correlated factor, assuming we don't completely screw up the industry. If we buy a typewriter company, obviously not the best management team in the world isn't going to do anything with that. But assuming we get a baseline good enough industry, it really is, we've found to be the most highly correlated factor. So the number one criteria that we have, we call it the will to win or management intensity, but really the will to win. And so you're interviewing someone. We use the top grading process that's in the book Top Grading by G.H. Smart. And so you do this structured interview. You talk to someone for 3 to 4 hours. You start in high school and go through yesterday, their background. And what I would say is, it either leaps out of that interview or it doesn't. And what I mean is this is someone who's got this will to win. They're going to throw the company or whatever they're working on their shoulders and run it through the burning building. And they've done that again and again and again. And they just have this fire and this energy. And after you've done a lot of these interviews with a lot of people over a long period of time, it leaps out of the interview or it doesn't. So that would be the number one thing. So it's a qualitative thing that people could have. We hire people who've shown that as special ops in Green Berets that have never been in private industry ever, but have that criteria. We've seen ballet dancers and people who work in investment banking. Anyone can possess that from any background. And what I love about that is it really, we're not saying that you have to have 20 years of this specific experience. We're hiring you for who you are at your core. We can teach you private equity. We can teach you how to run a business. We can't teach you to have this white hot desire to take over the world.
And exceptional businesses are created by these people. How do you identify the exceptional business?
There's a lot of things that go into evaluating a business, but if you had to summarize it, if I had to summarize it into 2 words, it would just be revenue quality. How for what we do. Now, remember, we're not venture investors. We're not predicting what cybersecurity is going to be the winner 20 years from now. We're buying pretty basic companies. So we're really looking for revenue quality. So how predictable is the revenue? How defensible is the revenue? How hard would it be for someone to take it away? How recurring is it? It can be reoccurring or recurring. And that's the number one thing that we're looking for. Now, we find that in subscription software, which is probably pretty obvious, but we also see it in plumbing and HVAC companies. We see it in IT services businesses and other things where sometimes you have to squint a little bit because it's not contractually recurring, but it's very predictable when you look at a large customer base.
One of the things in the private equity world that I've always found fascinating is people will talk about, you never want to be buying something from someone who's selling it usually. Like they know something that you don't, but that is the entire business. And so sometimes these transactions, your private equity firm is buying from another private equity firm, and the management team is kind of like a third party in the transaction that you've got to underwrite and kind of decide whether you're going to move forward with them or not. But when you're actually buying a team or a company from the management team, right? It's not another private equity firm. How do you kind of think through like, hey, they're selling me this. Am I like going to be holding the bag or is there some kind of like 1 + 1 = 3 scenario here?
Yeah, you're totally right. You're focusing on a great question. We're a little different in that we change management teams 100% of the time. I don't know that there's, in my knowledge, there's not another firm in the world that does that. We're the only people that do that. We manufacture or effectively create our own management teams from that Green Beret who's never worked in industry. We'll hire them maybe right out of an MBA program or 2 years out of McKinsey or something, and then we'll train them. So we bring our own management team to bear. And then what we're presenting to the owner is, hey, here's an option for you. Everyone else is going to say, we need you to stay for 3 to 5 years. You need to roll 30 to 40% of your equity. There's another option here, which is just sell 100% and you can retire and go on your boat or whatever you want. And we need a 6-month transition plan. And then we'll take over from here. And for the right seller, that is really, really compelling. Now, your other point of how do you know that there's not adverse selection? And that's what I go back to with the revenue quality. We have to do a really good job of assessing that and making sure that there's not something that they know that we don't know. And we've gotten good at that over the last 23 years. Because in our first fund, we weren't good at that at all. We made every mistake you can imagine. We got left holding all kinds of bags in that fund, and it wasn't fun at all. So we learned what where the landmines are and how to make sure we're not stepping on those.
It's funny because I think one of your favorite books is Competition Demystified. When I was doing research before this by Bruce.
No, you did a lot of research. You went deep, Anthony. I love it. I love it.
Well, I think the books that you read really are kind of how you're programming your mind, right?
Yep.
And so
totally.
In that book, you say he basically outlines 6 different ways that you can have these barriers to entry. And what I find funny is like somebody who got burnt by that is the person who goes and reads the book and then memorizes all 6 of them and really evaluates it, right?
Absolutely. Because so Michael Porter says there's these 5 forces: supplier power, buyer power, substitutes, et cetera. And Bruce Greenwald, who wrote Competition Demystified, basically says throw all that out. There's only one force. Not 5, there's one, and it's barriers to entry. And by the way, there are only 6 barriers to entry. There's nothing else. And so when you kind of zone in on those, I'll see if I can do this off memory, but it's economies of scale, switching costs, brand, technology, supply constraints like a coal mine. And I'm probably missing one. So
network effect.
Network effect. Yeah, the most powerful of all. You nailed it. Yeah. Thanks for bailing me out there. So those are the 6. And if the business doesn't have one of those 6, you're going to have, no matter how fast it's growing or what's happening, you're actually going to have people eating your lunch. And in our early years, we would have these companies that were growing at 30, 40, 50% or even higher. And we're buying them at great prices, and it looked great for like 2 years. And then they didn't have those barriers to entry. And so we there were horrible investments. So that book has really been really important.
It also then brings to mind this like almost a dichotomy to some degree. Like I think it's maybe Mark Andreessen, I think said, I don't know if he came up with it, but he basically said something to the effect of like, bad team meets good market wins. Bad or a good team meets bad market wins, which I think is very much like a venture capital style, view of the world. A Buffett style or view of the world is very much like barriers to entry. And so is it possible to really kind of draw a line in the sand and say, hey, look, certain businesses fit kind of private equity, certain businesses fit venture capital, or what seems to be happening over the last couple of years is like, maybe people are trying to gray the line. Like they're trying to say, hey, we can take venture style dollars or growth trajectories and apply it to some of these other businesses. And we see this with, dog walking. We see this with real estate and WeWorks and it seems like many of the big stories haven't worked, but I don't know if that is necessarily because you can't mix these two styles of investing?
I think the key for us has been to just know what you're really good at. And I think that's the key for Buffett too, not to compare myself to Buffett, but that's what he says is like, he says, know your circle of competence. And it's not important how big your circle is, it's that you know what it is. And I think that's really the magic. So whether it's Andreessen Horowitz or us, for us, we know exactly what we're good at. We know how to scale a business. We know how to hire, fire, do add-on acquisitions. We know how to, increase sales and marketing. Like we're great at that. When we stay in that lane, we tend to do pretty well. When we try to predict product market fit, when we try to predict what's going to win in this crowded field or things like that, we're just not good at that. That's not our superpower. And so the magic for us, believe it or not, every year that goes by, we narrow and narrow and narrow what we do, not the other way around. So we're not adding products and adding things. We're actually decreasing and just doing more of this tiny little specific thing, which is changing management, doing a lot of add-on acquisitions, winning through talent, and sales and marketing. That playbook has worked really well for us. And so the more when we stick to that, we do great. And I think when you see firms that blow up, it's usually you can almost always say they just went too big and went out of their zone, or they tried to do something that they're not good at.
Now, I've got a bunch of friends who run asset management firms. And if I was to ask them behind closed doors, are they better investor or a better asset management firm builder? Each one of them would kind of self-select into it. How do you think about that balance, right? It feels like it is two different skills that people kind of have a tension between as they're building these firms.
Yeah, another great question. I would add a third bucket, which is company building. And maybe that's in one of those buckets, I'm not sure. But company building is how I would define what we're great at. We think about starting with a blank piece of paper, figuring out an industry we want to go into, and then building one of the largest companies in the world and in that industry. And we're really, really good at that. And yes, we have to manage assets. We have to fundraise because we're in that business. And we have to be good at investing. But really our superpower is building companies. And the foundation of that really is talent, which is one of the things I think we're the best in the world at.
Now, you mentioned that you guys will bring in a new management team 100% of the time. What you did not say is that you remove every single existing employee and replace them. So it's almost like leadership changes, but the employee base will stay the same for the most part. How have you learned over the years to transition as effectively and efficiently as possible without much disruption to the business, but also understanding like you're probably buying a business because you think it can be better or bigger than it is. And so there's going to be changes that happen for those employees.
Yeah. So the answer is that it's taken us 23 years to figure out exactly what you're saying. The reason that nobody changes management is because it's very hard, and that literally a lot of firms will show their track record and they'll say, well, here's our actual track record, because we're taking out the 2 deals where we change managers because we don't do that anymore because it didn't work out. Because of what you're saying, Anthony, which is that when you transition to a new management team, there's a lot of complexity to that. Gosh, I could spend the next 3 hours talking about the secret and special sauce into that, and I'd be happy to. But let me try to see if I could summarize it. The best way I would say is think about it like concentric circles. So we'll put in our own leadership, which is usually a CEO, maybe a CFO, and then that team will come up they'll work with a coach, and they'll go through the existing team first to try to figure out the strategy. So let me make it more tangible. Let's say that firm was to hire McKinsey to figure out their strategy. McKinsey's going to first talk to all the employees, and then they're going to talk to all the customers. So we just cut the McKinsey part out, and the CEO who comes in, the first thing they do for the first 6 months is they go on a listening tour. And the most common thing that employees say when they talk to them is, I've worked at this company for 15 years and no one's ever asked me my opinion before. And, when you sit down with that employee and this evil private equity firm called Alpine comes in and buys your company and they replace the founder. And the first move that the CEO makes is to say, hey, I'd like to have an hour and a half and I'm just going to listen. What's going well? What's not? What would you do if you were me? Where are we winning? Where are we not winning? How could we, what's your advice for me? That's literally the first move they make. And then with all that information from the employees and the customers, the CEO and maybe with a little bit of help from us, will start to design a plan. And the plan is probably more about what we don't do than what we do. and then they'll involve the top 5 executives, and they'll share that, and then they'll take feedback from those executives. All of a sudden, it's our plan. Now it's the executive team's plan, and then they'll take that out to the next level of management, and then it's their plan, and then they'll take. That's what I mean by concentric circles. It kind of starts with a small group of people and then sort of expands out. And each time it expands, you're getting the input from the rest of the people, and so everyone feels like they've had a say in designing that plan because they have. And it doesn't mean we do everything everyone says, but at least people got to feel heard and valued. And we have this expression that the answer is in the room. So your strategy, what you need to do, it's in the room. The people at the company know. Your job as a leader is to kind of harness that. And between your customers, your suppliers, and your employees, you have the answer. You just have to kind of get it out of them. And then in terms of transition management, we definitely have a lot more that we expect from employees. And the majority of the time, employees step up and they're excited about that. They want to be feeling like they're putting 80, 100% of their potential into the company. And some people don't. Some people liked coming in at 9:30, kind of ducking and hiding. And those people, that's probably not the right place for them. But the vast, vast, vast majority of people, when we buy a business, not only stay on, but they're re-energized. We measure the net promoter score of all the employees the day we buy the company, and then we measure it every quarter after we own it. And almost without exception, we're increasing that NPS about 20 points in a short period of time, which is a big increase. So it's not just qualitative. We actually measure how we're doing on the employee net promoter score as a proxy for how the culture is improving.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Your comment, the answer is in the room, reminds me that every single time we've ever had to fire someone, all of the other employees almost always will say thank you. Like they knew before the management knew.
So one of the most common misconceptions, which is if that great CEOs don't fire people. And of course you want to coach them and you want to give them every opportunity to succeed. But if they're not performing, you have to let those people go for the reason that you're saying. All the employees already know it. It's really killing. Everyone's worked on a team where there's some people that aren't pulling their weight, and it's really demoralizing. So it's actually one of the things in our playbook is to make sure that we're, fielding an A team.
When you talk about a playbook, is this like literally a written manual that you're handing to these folks that you're putting in as management, or is it more so kind of osmosis? Like how do you go from Graham Weaver, 23 years experience of doing all the good things and bad things that go into private equity, and teaching someone maybe coming out of an MBA program?
It is written down and codified, but that's 5% of what people learn, how they learn. We have a 23 or so coaches and consultants that will pair up with the CEO, because this could be a 30-year-old who's never run something before. So they get a coach who goes into the company physically with them for 6 months. And then that coach knows that entire playbook about the process I was mentioning before about listening and rolling out the vision, holding people accountable, putting in place a cadence of meetings and accountability. So they're working with that coach to put that codified playbook into action. And that's been really powerful for us. And again, that's taken 23 years to figure all that out. And that's why we can transition management, because we have all that kind of machinery. Without that, it would be really, really hard.
You've previously written about 3 lessons you've learned from hiring. And again, you've just done this so long that these 3 things seem to really cover the majority of it. The first is transform episodic hiring into programmatic hiring. I thought that was a really interesting one that maybe you could elaborate on. This episode is brought to you by Auradine. They are a brand new startup led by a number of Silicon Valley legends who just raised $81 million to build the future of internet infrastructure. You're probably wondering what that means, so let me explain. There are numerous new disruptive technologies that are being adopted simultaneously, from blockchain to artificial intelligence to zero-knowledge technologies. In order to ensure that these technologies thrive in this new world, we need new infrastructure, and that is where Auradine comes in. They just launched their first product line called Teraflux, which is a Bitcoin miner powered by the world's first 4-nanometer silicon chip technology. These air-cooled, single-phase and dual-phase immersion cooling miners have unrivaled speed and efficiency
They have superior uptime, and they leverage a brand new innovation called Energy Tune that allows miners to dynamically adjust the energy consumption and Bitcoin hash rate based on demand response needs of the electrical grids. Auradine is an ambitious company working on hard problems. I'm really impressed with them. And if you want to check out more, you can go to auradine.com. That's AURADINE.com. Go check them out at auradine.com today.
So yeah, episodic hiring is what everyone does. They need let's say they're Alpine and they need a new private equity analyst. They hire a recruiter. They go out to all the banks. They interview 12 people. They find one, et cetera. Or you're hiring a CEO of a software company and you go, and then they're a healthcare software company. So you hire a recruiter. They show you all the healthcare software companies, CEOs that are available, that want to move, that want your job. It's like two people. That's how everyone does it. What we've found is that when you have repeated roles that you're going to be hiring for, that you can transform those into I made the term up, programmatic hiring. So for us, using that investing analyst example, we'll go to undergrad schools and we'll bring in a cohort of 20, and then we'll train them. And they'll go through this entire training program over the summer. Then the next year when they graduate, because we hire them between their junior and senior year, the next year they come in, they go through another training program. And so we can onboard a number of them at the same time. And the good thing about that is you have a recurring stream of graduates, and you can build a brand at those schools. So you're not reinventing the wheel every time. And then you can train a bunch of people at the same time. Now that sounds like you're like, well, yeah, it's kind of obvious. But when you actually look at businesses, no one does that. So, if we have an accounting business and the number one product that they have is a mid-level accountant who does 80% of all the work, why don't you make that programmatic? Why don't you go back a couple steps to where those people are graduating and then train them up? And the benefits are massive. It's not just saving on recruiting, it's saving on time, it's building a brand, it's getting better people, it's training them your way, it's having them not having to unlearn all the stuff that they learned, that is bad. And then really that's in that accounting example, or in our example, that's your whole product, that's your whole world. So we want those people to be people that we've spent a lot of time and energy training. That programmatic hiring applies to almost any business that you're in, and almost no one does it.
Yeah, it's a great insight. The second one is hiring for attributes over experience. You mentioned earlier when you're replacing some management team, sometimes people come in with no experience. How do you think about the attributes outside of maybe just like the desire to win or that competitive spirit?
If they're going to be a CEO, it's the will to win. It's the ability to inspire followers, because their number one job is going to be build a team. So is this someone who can inspire people to join them? It's an ability to sell, because they're going to have to sell everything, employees, customers. Eventually they'll have to sell the company. And it's an ability to prioritize, like say no to things and just be super focused. So that's what we're really trying to assess when we're bringing people on. Again, the great thing about hiring for attributes is just that you just widen the pool of candidates dramatically. You also improve diversity dramatically, because you're not like, if we're hiring a CEO of a software company and we require them to have 20 years of experience, that diversity battle was won or lost 20 years ago. And let me say it was actually lost, most likely. So when we don't require that 20 years of experience, we just have this much, much bigger aperture of people that we can put in those roles. Even above all that, it's just way more highly correlated to success. You show me someone who has that white hot desire to win and can build a team, and they do start worse than the experienced CEO. They start because they don't have the experience. But typically in our experience, within 12 to depending on the industry, between 12 and 24 months, they're catching that experienced person. And then for the rest of our hold period, they're shooting way, way above that experienced person.
Yeah, that makes sense. A counterintuitive one is, rather than go chase the best talent, you also say as a third point, make your company the best place that the best talent wants to work, like kind of serve as a magnet almost.
Yeah. Well, there's this one meme I saw one time on social media that said, okay, you want to go find your best life partner, your intimate relationship. So make a list, be really clear, make a list of all the attributes you want your person to have. okay, blah, blah, blah. They want to be loyal and they want to be a good listener and all this stuff. And then the punchline is, and then go be that list. Don't demand that list of everyone else. Go be that list. And I love that. I thought that was like the most brilliant thing. And so that's the same thing with building a business. It's like, yeah, you can go out and want all these great people, but you first have to be that firm that they would want to work at. You have to embody the things that this high performing person wants, which is tons of autonomy, tons of accountability, ownership. They want to be able to run fast. They want to they want to work with other exceptional people. They want a certain amount of capital that they can go deploy, and they want to be learning and growing, and they want a super exciting high trajectory career path. I mean, that's what I wanted when I graduated. That's what those high caliber people want. So the mistake a lot of firms make is they want that high caliber person, but then they have this company that's got all these layers and bureaucracy, and it's a tenure based place, and you're reporting to someone who's reporting to someone who's reporting to someone, and you can't get decisions made. And then they wonder why they can't attract the best people, or why they do attract them and then they leave. So you have to work backwards and say, if you're the best person graduating or coming out of one of these programs or something, what do they want? And then go be that firm. And that, by the way, that what I just said is the hardest part of my job. The hardest part of my job isn't figuring out where revenue quality is. It's what I just said. It's making our firm that firm even as we continue to grow. And that gets harder and harder and harder. That is the single hardest part of my job.
Over the last 23 years, are there one or two things that you point back to that were inflection points in moving you closer to being that firm that you felt like would serve as the magnet for the best talent?
Yeah, this is going to sound really maybe a little bit psychological or something, but it was a limiting belief. I mean, for the first decade of running Alpine, I really had this belief in my mind that why would a great person want to come work at my firm? We don't have the most assets. Maybe I'm not a great leader. There's so many other bigger firms than us. And so it started with, I don't think I realized that I hired an executive coach in 2009. And with the help of that coach, I started to just flush out all these limiting beliefs that I had. And limiting beliefs are so dangerous. And they're most dangerous when you don't realize you even have them. That's when they can do the most damage. So all of a sudden I started putting these things on paper and, looking at this and saying, well, yeah, I actually do think the best people should work for me because I can provide them all these things. I know what they want. And so that was a huge turning point, was just realizing that we were worthy of having these people. And then we had one really good hire, and he was incredible, and he reset the bar for everyone. Then we said, okay, we want more of that. And then on the CEO side, we had one really good hire, and she was lights out and incredible. And it took us. So then all of a sudden we had this like infusion of energy, and we said, this is what we need. This is what we want. We finally saw it. And then once you see that, you can't go back.
There's something that I did as a kid that I thought was really weird, and I would have been embarrassed to tell other people. And now I've come to realize that it is a fairly common component of most young people's lives who end up having, pretty high success. And it is, I'm going to put an overlay called self-help tapes, but it could be a whole bunch of different components of this. I grew up in high school, we got cell phones. And so that became a huge deal, and we started to get access to social media. And so it wasn't kind of the more traditional self-help tapes maybe of the years before. But I saw somewhere that you used to listen to self-help tapes when you were a teenager. And so what were the tapes, and why do you think that was so important to kind of setting you on a certain trajectory?
That was also another turning point. So maybe that was really even the first turning point. So I grew up in a blue collar town in Ohio. It was called right outside of Toledo, which is really the Rust Belt, made auto parts for Detroit. And then when I was, 12 or 13, my parents got divorced, and my earth under me was kind of not stable. And I was looking for something to hold on to. And I mowed lawns probably 6 or 7 hours a weekend, because that's a great job you can make more money doing that, I calculated, than anything else per hour. And then the Sony Walkman came out in the 80s, and I started off just listening to music. But then I remember one time I went to the library to check out some more tapes, And there was this thing that said, think and grow rich. I was like, I want to think and grow rich. How do I do that? And it was, of course, Napoleon Hill's famous book. And I listened to that thing. And it was just like, I put the first tape in and I was just like, yes, this is what I've been looking for my whole life, which is like a system to actually start setting goals and changing your mindset and achieving things. And I can't even tell you how many times I listened to that. And then I listened to Brian Tracy. He had a whole bunch of tapes on setting goals. Tony Robbins, even back then, believe it or not, I think he was probably 20 years old when he was making his first tapes. I used my lawn mowing money to buy his infomercial, Personal Power, listen to that many times. And really all those things were very similar in the message, which is part one, figure out what you want. Not what you want, like, I want money, but like, what do you want your life to look like? And think big, like be really aspirational. I thought that was a great message. And then part two is like, write it down every day, present tense, and then write down the three things that you would do. This is what my own version now. Write down the three things you're going to do to move toward that today. Like every morning, today, what are the three things I'm going to do to move forward to? In my case, one of the goals I set was be the number one rower in the world. And so what are the three things I'm going to do today to move toward that goal? And the three things don't have to be that crazy or amazing, but if you do them every single day, you get almost anything you wrote down. And so I started achieving some things early on using that system. And I was like, gosh, this is incredible. What else could I put down? And to date, literally, I haven't had an example of something that I've written down that hasn't yielded to a daily practice of moving toward it. I've not found one thing. There's nothing I've set out to do that I haven't been able to, move toward or even attain using that process.
It's fascinating to me because when I was 20 years old, I read Think and Grow Rich. I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and The Richest Man in Babylon. And all three of those, I always say like they're good books, but it was also, I read them when I was like too stupid to have already been set in my ways.
Right. So, exactly. Yeah.
Something about being a teenager listening to those probably also was like you were receptive to the message, which was probably pretty important.
Yeah. You were impressionable at that time and you were looking for a framework to kind of grab onto, and that's what they provided. And it was unbelievable. So one of the reasons that I go on social media is because I started going on in Instagram and TikTok and YouTube, and like all the people on there are selling this get rich quick stuff, flip houses, buy this particular cryptocurrency, do this, do that. And you too, trade options and buy my program for $29.99. And then you're going to get rich quick. And I was just appalled by all that stuff that was on there. And so I started trying to bring back some of the like basic stuff. And there weren't a lot of people on those programs that are saying, no, slow down. You got to actually like do the work, kind of like how we started off the podcast, right? You gotta put in the hours and do the work. And the most dangerous thing about the get rich quick stuff is there's lots of stuff, but it's demoralizing. It's demoralizing because let's say I'm a 24-year-old and I'm slugging away and I have in my mind that everyone's getting rich quick except me, and I'm doing something wrong. And, because I haven't become a millionaire trading XYZ options or something, that, I'm failing. It's so dangerous. So I just, gosh, I was really, really, upset about all that. And it's still on there, by the way, as you well know.
Well, it's happiness is the difference between expectations and reality, right?
Yep,
and so yes,
exactly.
if you literally think you can get rich overnight and you don't, for sure, it's depressing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And social media does a really good job of making your reality unattainable. Your whatever you want your reality to be something that's really pretty much unattainable.
Yeah, come on, Graham. Where's your 5 Ferraris that are all parked outside your 7 houses? You gave up drinking. What have been the pros and the cons of giving up drinking?
Well,
this episode is brought to you by Cal.com. What do I have in common with Chad Hurley from YouTube, Toby from Shopify, and Alexis from 776 and the co-founder of Reddit? We all use Cal.com instead of Calendly, and we are all early investors as well. Cal.com is leading the charge of scheduling platforms in the open source sphere, offering you the chance to harness the efficiency previously reserved for elite corporations and tech gurus. If you like to have your calendar organized and be able to have an efficient exchange when scheduling, but you love all of the benefits of open source technology, then Cal.com's for you. They are transforming sophisticated calendar management into an accessible tool for all via a user-friendly interface. You can customize it and you can make your calendar work for you. Use code POMP for $500 off when you set up your team with Cal.com today. Again, go to Cal.com, CAL.com, and use code POMP to get $500 off when you sign up. Cal.com, an open source tool that allows you to take back control of your calendar, be efficient when scheduling, and make sure that no one can steal your time.
So my giving up drinking in 2015, we sold a business. So I started Alpine in 2001. 14 years later, I paid myself $100,000 through that time. And 14 years later, we had our first deal that we sold that actually generated the carried interest, which is where the real money comes. And then I've never been so depressed because it was like I worked so hard for so many years for this goal that happened. And then it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. At the end of that goal was still me, right? With all my same stuff, and I thought it would feel different and it didn't. So I got really down. And then I started reading a lot about depression. I mean, I was like not wanting to get out of bed, really, really down. And it was physical. It wasn't just like, woe is me. It was like literally physically felt like I was just, hungover all the time. So I started reading about a lot about depression, and I was like, I'm going to fire every single bullet. So I was like, what's on that list? Number one is alcohol. I mean, it literally is a depressant. So that was number one on any list you look at pretty much, which also affects sleep, which was number two on the list. Caffeine, my diet, gluten, exercise. And I went on antidepressants, I did everything. And it over time, in a short period of time, I kind of snapped out of it. And then I didn't go back to drinking. I would go back a little bit and then I'd just feel worse. And after a while, I was just like, the downside is just not worth it, But the downside of giving up drinking is it definitely impacts my social life. So I go out with friends sometimes and they're all drinking and I'm just like not that engaged in the conversation, which probably if I was buzzed or something would be fine. But when you're sitting there sober and we're having the same conversation we had last week and the same one about this and that, and it's just like it's changed my tolerance for kind of having these repetitive go nowhere conversations in social settings. So frankly, I don't really enjoy a lot of those things that I used to. And I don't know if that's a downside or not, but it's definitely an effect that I only kind of put that together a couple of years ago, where it's like, gosh, I really haven't been enjoying these interactions. And maybe those were people that I didn't enjoy sober before, I don't know, but that's definitely been a factor.
What about caffeine? Because I think, more and more people are giving up alcohol just throughout society. You can see kind of the numbers rising there, which, okay, maybe people are getting smarter, but caffeine intake is also rising. And so you're kind of bucking both you're going with the trend on one hand, but you're bucking the trend. So what's up with the caffeine?
All right. So there's a study that I found, and I wrote a blog on this. I don't have it in front of me, but there's a study where basically this is what they said. Okay, if you drink caffeine, let's say you've never had a cup of coffee in your life, and you start drinking coffee, you're going to get this incredible rush for a few weeks. Then that's going to be your sort of new base. Then your body, so what caffeine does is it blocks your adenosine receptors. It basically looks like adenosine receptor and kind of blocks that stops making you feel tired. Your body normally produces those things that block adenosine when it sleeps. So caffeine's kind of replacing that. Well, over time, your body just makes more adenosine receptors, so it's like, no, I still want to feel tired. So it just makes more. So what you might notice is that same cup of coffee you have in the morning doesn't get you the same bolt that it used to. So what the study showed was that if you've been drinking caffeine for like 3 months, that cup of coffee you have in the morning isn't even returning you to your baseline that you had before you ever had coffee. So let's say your baseline's 100, and now I drink my first cup of coffee in the morning. Let's say I wake up and I'm at a 60, and I drink that cup of coffee and I get up to 80. Well, I'm still going to crash back down to 60 later in the day, where I'm like, why don't I just cut all that out and just stay at 100 forever, And so it is hell giving up caffeine. It is hell. Like it is everything bad. Like it is like it's withdrawal, like you would have any substance. I mean, caffeine is an addictive substance, so it is hard as hell to get off. I tried multiple times and failed. And finally I did, and I just toughed it out. And look, it doesn't mean I'm perfect and I have like tons of energy all the time, but I'm like, I'd rather just stay at 100 than have to jump up and down between 60 and 80. I feel 1,000 times better, no question. I sleep better, but giving it up is hard. It's really hard.
I want to talk about a couple of pieces that you've written on your blog. One of them, you said that you turned 50 and basically like, hey, here is what I learned, right? So you said, time, like the avalanche, stops for no one. Don't waste it living someone else's life. And then you said the true game of life is an internal one, not an external one. Explain it.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that I went through my whole life thinking all the battles were external, and that there's this thing to get through and that thing to get through and this and that. And you get through this and you realize it was all you the whole time. Like you were fighting those battles so that you would feel something, because you wanted to feel something. Maybe you wanted to feel enough. Maybe you wanted to feel achievement. Maybe you wanted to feel love, or you wanted to feel successful or whatever. But it's still you're the one who's determining what game you're playing, what the score of that game is at any time, what the rules of that game are. It seems like society's creating that, but you're the one who's accepting that or not. And it's an incredibly powerful concept when you start to really realize it's your game. This whole thing is your game. And yes, there are external events. There's people, there's sickness, there's death, there's all kinds of things, but the vast majority of life is a game that you're creating the rules, and you're deciding if you're winning, you're deciding if you're losing, you're putting meaning on an event that's happening, you're putting meaning on how someone talked to you, or something like that. And I started arriving there with from doing a lot of meditation and a lot of reading, and then once you kind of really get there, it doesn't mean you're like that. You're like Zen all the time, all of your life. I still have all the same stuff, but it does give you a lot more agency over what you decide to focus on and pay attention to and get upset about or get excited about. And it really is an internal game.
On the topic of time management, you wrote, one of the greatest areas of conflict arises when what we are working on is not consistent with what is most important to us. Mm-hmm. And in this piece, you talked about blocking out, family time or exercise, et cetera. What is kind of like the big lesson there that you've learned around how you keep what's important to you aligned with what's actually on your calendar?
I mean, I think that if you look at entropy, like imagine you're doing none of that. Okay. And you're like, I'll use myself as an example. Let's say I'm doing 0. This is what my day looks like. I get up, do my morning routine, commute to work, fight traffic, show up in a meeting, maybe snarfed out some lunch. Then, maybe I've returned some emails, couple Zoom meetings, fight traffic on the way home, dinner, get back online, do emails, go to bed. That's my day. And then I wake up and do it again. And what's happening is the urgent is taking over. The urgent almost always will take over from the important. This is from Stephen Covey's, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So so the urgent will take over your whole life, social media, meetings, emails, traffic, work, et cetera. That's always going to dominate. So you have to kind of proactively put the important into your calendar. And it starts with deciding what is important. That's the first part. So I talk to 2 different coaches pretty much every week. And one is just like, hey, what's the vision? Where do I want to go? And then blocking time to either work on that vision or do the activities aligned with that vision on my calendar. I don't take any meetings before 10 a.m. because I do a lot of my thinking in the morning. That's when my brain works the best. So I'm blocking out time to like proactively think about where I want to go. And for me, that's an executive coach. I don't need a personal trainer to go to the gym, but if I did, I would hire one to drag my ass there. I do need a personal trainer to do this intention and kind of goal setting. So that's a coach for me. And then it's putting that stuff on the calendar. And then I would say like work is infinite. You know, if as soon as you accept that there's an infinite amount of work to do, then it's almost like freeing because you're never going to finish your work. So if you put in the things that matter, for me, that's exercise, meditating, spending time with my family, doing my thinking with my coach, spending some time with my team, those kinds of things. And those are in there. Then the work can kind of fit in around that. And you're never going to finish your work. So if you have this mentality, it's like, I'm going to finish my work, then I'm going to spend time with my family. Like, good luck, because you can always fill in the cracks with work.
Makes a ton of sense. You also said that there's 8 words that flipped a mental switch for you. And I think this comes from the book Switch by Dan and Chip Heath. Find what's working and do more of that, which is like the most simple but powerful statement of all time.
It is. You just said it. It's the most simple and powerful statement of all time. Our firm has made more money with those 8 words than anything else we've ever done. So when I said earlier in the podcast, like every fund and every year that goes by, we narrow down what we do. We're really just expanding our bright spots. So for example, we had this one woman that we hired out of business school who was this home run hire. Now each year we're hiring 25 of them. We found a couple, a couple industries that really, really work for us. So we're narrowing in on more industries that look just like that. And I think a lot of people would do so well if they focused on the things that they're really great at and the things that are really working. And instead, our minds just kind of have this loss aversion where we spend time on our biggest weaknesses, or in our case, it's easy to want to spend time on your companies that aren't going well, or spend time coaching your people who aren't performing. Instead, give more energy to your people who are performing, give them more responsibility, train them more, spend all your time on your companies that are winning. And again, that sounds really obvious, but it's so rarely followed because of this kind of loss aversion that we have. Plus, the things that aren't going well become urgent, like I was saying before. They're the squeaky wheels. Those employees are the ones that are causing problems. The companies that are missing debt covenants. Those things become urgent. And so, find what's working and do more of that is like it is the best 8 words that have ever been written in strategy in my mind. And I've read a lot of books on strategy.
My last question for you is a topic that I think a mentor told you, which is read to win the day. Now, I'm somebody who loves reading. I read probably more than anybody else I know, but I've never heard read to win the day. So describe kind of what that is and how you implement it.
I think like you are turned on to reading and like probably like when you're reading something in the morning, there's a lot of stuff going on. One is you're learning something. Second is you're actually kind of improving your mind's ability to focus on the next thing because you're honing your energy on one thing. You're getting ideas and your mind's going to be open to new things throughout the day. And so it's like the meta habit, it's just. And so read to win the day would be like, hey, what if that's part of your morning routine? Even if it's 10 minutes, like it does have a big impact for a lot of reasons. And just having that curiosity and continue to learn and grow, it's just got so many knock-on effects. And I don't have to sell you on that. It sounds like you're already really, really sold on that. But that's been a habit that's really helped. And I'm shocked. I mean, the stats are insane on this. It's like, oh gosh, I'm going to get these wrong so we can look them up, but it's like 90% of people haven't even read one book in the last year, something like that. It's unbelievable.
I host quite a number of dinners at our place, and we kind of try to curate people from different industries and, people we can learn from kind of interesting conversations. And at the end, I always ask everyone, recommend one book, and people who have been to these dinners will laugh because I literally get on the Amazon app and buy them right there on the spot. And
that's
whatever
amazing.
They are, I just wanted to read them. But I am shocked at how many people don't have a book to recommend. Like they will literally be like, I haven't read a book since, college. You're like, you're 45 years old. Like, what do you mean?
Yeah. Yeah,
And
it's
they're
like,
like,
I mean, imagine someone spends, like, imagine I wrote a book, okay? I spend 51 years of my life learning certain things. And then I'm going to consolidate that down to 120 pages. And I'm going to spend 3 years doing that. And then you can read that book in 3 hours. That's a pretty high return on that 3 hours. If the author is someone that you can learn something from. And you're going to learn something from almost everybody. By the way, while we're on the subject of books reading, I just finished Elon Musk's biography, and I know I saw you tweeted on him the other day. That's been a pretty crazy topic recently, and it's pretty interesting because I just finished reading his book, and then the Twitter thing's kind of unfolding real time. It's not what I was expecting at all, I guess.
We are recording this right after he basically told advertisers, go F yourself a day before. And when I saw the clip yesterday, I turned to my wife and I said, demon mode, because in the book, they talk about like he's unleashed.
Yeah. And it's interesting because he got to be demon mode in Tesla and SpaceX. And because the product was so good, it didn't matter. And the demon mode sometimes actually helped him. I hate to say it. I don't certainly advocate demon mode, but in some ways it probably propelled him. But in this business where you're at the mercy of advertisers and public opinion, the demon mode doesn't. It has bigger consequences than it did in other industries.
100%. But that book is fantastic. So
it is absolutely fantastic, unbelievable. I read the Isaacson one, and it was unbelievable. Definitely worth reading. You didn't ask me my book type, but that would have been my recommendation. Yeah.
Any other books that you would recommend that you think people would really benefit from?
I mean, I have probably in terms of the books that had the biggest impact on my life. I would say, Warren Buffett's biography or any of his annual letters. If you're in the investing world, you just can't read those enough. It's just like it's the kind of meat and potatoes of investing. And in terms of leadership and management, I think Good to Great is a classic, and the book Switch are probably two of the best ones. I've been on a huge kick for meditating and Zen. And I mean, I love anything by Eckhart Tolle, Alan Watts. His stuff is unbelievable. Those are a few. I think those are 5 or 6 different ones that are worth reading.
Fantastic. Graham, where can we send people to find you online? Or if people would like to sell their business, come work at, or just learn more from Alpine, where can we send them for Alpine too?
Yeah. So Alpine is our website's alpineinvestors.com. And then I'm on TikTok. I know you don't like TikTok, but I'm on there, Graham C. Weaver. And that's my Instagram as well. And I'm on LinkedIn. So all those places. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you doing this, and we'll definitely do it again in the future.
Thanks, Anthony. It was a lot of fun. Really enjoyed it. Super fun.